I am live. I am reading a book by Joan Marshall Grant entitled The Vague Vacation, published in 1947, and it is a description of her travels through France with her then husband Charles. We're here in chapter 10, and it is entitled BUREAUX. The following day, we had a sharp lesson as to the necessity of arranging documents adequately before leaving England. Through too much haste and too little attention to detail, we had discovered that our visa would not permit us to return to France after entering Switzerland. We expected this would be a trivial adjustment, for our host in Paris had given us an introduction to the British consul in Lyon. We drove there some 70 kilometers and visited the consul, who telephoned to the right department warning them of our imminent arrival. We lost ourselves twice on the way to the bureau and became so snappy with each other that Petrol leapt into the car. A maze of corridors and several pointless conversations wasted another half hour. A small snag to French courtesy is that they never interrupt explanations, and so listen to one's whole story before regretfully announcing that theirs is the wrong department and one must start again elsewhere. At last we found the right official, who appeared intent on wasting the next hour in irrelevant conversation. Eventually he said that it was indeed sad that he must ask us to return next day before the matter could be completed. Why? I asked in we asked in exasperated unison. He pointed to the clock, which registered 5 minutes past 4. It was not permitted to stamp passports after 4 o'clock. I tried to appeal to his better nature, but it remained insentient. He agreed that it was a shocking waste of petrol to drive an extra 140 kilometers, and that it was most annoying to be found by idiotic regulations, but he refused to change his mind. We left furious and defeated, muttering, "Bureaucrats will be bureaucrats," and even ruder things. Fortunately, by telephoning the consul from Poissy, an achievement which took 2 solid hours, aided wholeheartedly by Madame Blanc, we discovered that BUREAUX, not Lyon, was the right place for our visa, being the administrative headquarters of the department of Hayling. This was much more convenient, for it's only 37 kilometers, and also the town where we had to apply for petrol tickets, which can only be issued weekly against the letter of credit supplied in Paris. Experience having warned us that a French bureau, like its English equivalent, is best endured by those whose stomachs were full, whose temperaments are placid as may be. We produced a condition of benign well-being with succulent frogs and a local wine an exceptional delicacy. To quote Charles, "It is full-bodied yet clean and dry to the palate, the colour lightly golden with a faintness of green. The nose no better than young wines should be." We arrived at the passport office about 2:30, and were directed to a bare room of the usual tremendous height, all of 18 feet. In it there were 2 desks, of which the more important was empty and the other occupied by a young woman who took not the slightest notice of us as we stood waiting to be asked our business. We were to find out before long that this is the convention, a very important convention, that the socially senior person speaks first, Thus, in any similar situation, the Englishman may be left standing mute in a large office full of people, only too anxious to help him, for the visitor is always credited with seniority. Charles, at this time, however, knew nothing of the convention and was merely peevy at what he took to be the discourtesy of the young woman. He addressed her with studied politeness, inquiring whether he had not made a mistake, whether this could be the bureau for the regulation of passports. He then displayed animation. She got up, she said yes, this was the place. She asked what we wanted. We told her both at once, and she seemed bewildered. Charles looked at me with a sharp eye and pretended to explain it all over again very slowly. She said she could not help us, regrettably, but there it was. Charles went back to the beginning again. Is this not the bureau for passport? It was. Well, why then did she assert that she could not help us? I demand, said Charles in a flash of irritation, that you call the chief. The girl then let forth a flow of sound which was too fast for our slow ears to pick up, even into to break up even into words, let alone recognizable words. What a wonderful language it is! So much more flexible than ours, so much more responsive to the nuance of emotional color. She went out of the room, and Charles looked at me with the inquiry of a spaniel who has brought a dead rat and is not sure whether the treasure will be appreciated. I couldn't let it pass, he said, could I? But before I could think of a suitable and yet tactful reply, the girl was back again to say that the chief had not yet returned from lunch and would wait. And would we wait? It was very civil, offered chairs. We countered with the inevitable cigarette. It was refused, but not with ignominy. For a while we smoked in silence, and then Charles, unable to bear any longer the feeling that he had been rude without cause, made some trivial remark which started a conversation that promised well enough until he discovered that she thought he was Swiss. I saw him beginning to turn into the family calls his purple gorilla. She blanched as well. She might. He hurried from the room and returned with a brisk woman of 40, smart and efficient, but unsmiling. He sat with practiced determination at the bigger of the two desks, and we realized that this was indeed the chief. Obviously, the move was, to me, so disregarding Charles, who it seems had already done enough damage. I addressed to her the story of our misfortunate error in taking out a transit visa. The history was well received, and she was obviously most anxious to help. But on the other hand, the request, which we made for an extension to a total of 3 months in France, was altogether too irregular. He regretted, but there was nothing to be done but to take a month early. Charles rescued us from what looked like defeat by telling a rambling tale of how we had always wanted to bring our Citroën to France, but that even a French car grows old, and how dreadful it would be to be landed with a breakdown and at the same time have the visa run out. This, of course, was a real possibility. We had never seriously considered it. He remained unmoved, so he embarked on a saga of my health. Within minutes, the decision was made. We should have our 3 months visa. To her, our gratitude was and is very considerable, for we know how difficult it is to stretch the inelastic substance of authority. The test came when the passports, already stamped, had to be presented to us to an even higher officer of state. The young woman, who had thought we were Swiss, asked of the chief as she came back, how did he take it? Oh, no trouble, was the reply. Unwilling to cause even more disturbance, we still had to inquire about Petrol, and the chief would not have it otherwise, but that she herself took us to another office in the same building where they were supposed to know about such things. This they did, but the place to which they sent us was halfway across the town, and with the usual understatement, had told us it was only a few hundred yards, so we had not bothered to fetch the car. When we got there, Charles was in a sweat, his coat over his arm, his tie hanging like a halter. It was fortunate, as it turned out, that I insisted he cool and dress before tackling le bureau de BUREAUX. He left me drinking thin and tasteless beer at a cafe, while he, armed with the acquis de caution, the formidable name for the car's papers, and his passport, braved the new unknown. On the way there, we had discussed the etiquette of the senior speaking first, and so he was prepared for the next ordeal. He drudged off gloomily and returned beaming. It transpired that the most beautiful of women was not only in the office, but actually in charge of the business of the coupons. He had addressed her, it seemed, immediately he crossed the threshold, and thereafter everything went merry as a bus to Margate until, overcome with self-congratulation, he had been unable to find his way from the building and had been forced to go back to her to ask the way out. We arrived home wilted, but triumphant, and were sustained by the carmine beauty of quantities of écrevisse, the river crayfish, not much larger than prawns. So today is Sunday, the 15th of December, and the next chapter is fancy plumbing.